The story starts with Nancy, a young woman, hiding in the bushes. She's in shock after finding out she's in the early stages of pregnancy. She tells her best friend Samantha about it. When Samantha asks who the father is, Nancy admits she's not sure because she's recently been involved with a few of her male friends. Feeling confused, Nancy realizes this is a result of her carefree lifestyle and doesn't know what to do. Nancy works the afternoon shift at a restaurant, so she hurries to get ready. While changing clothes in her car and listening to music, her car suddenly breaks down, leaving her stranded. With no other choice, she abandons the car and starts walking. On the way, she runs into her coworker Bobby, who always rides his bike to work. She asks him for a ride, and he agrees, helping her get to the restaurant on time. At work, Nancy reports to her boss, her father, who recently promoted her to manager. He reminds her to be more responsible and to set a good example for the other employees. He also tells her he has a date that evening with his new girlfriend. Since Nancy's mother passed away years ago, her father has been lonely. He asks Nancy to handle the closing shift while he's out. Later, while cleaning tables, Nancy finds a customer's leftover plate of beans and eggs. The smell makes her feel sick and she runs to the bathroom to vomit. Jake, the chef and a close friend of her father, notices something is wrong. He guesses Nancy might be pregnant. Moments later, Nancy's father unexpectedly comes in while she's still feeling unwell. To help her, Jake quickly makes up an excuse, saying her nausea is from spoiled meat, keeping her father from suspecting the real reason. Nancy returns to work, but the evening takes a tense turn. A coworker named Petty accidentally spills some water. Knowing Petty has a developmental condition, Nancy doesn't make a fuss. Soon after, a group of teenagers on bikes, known for causing trouble in the area, arrives. Not wanting them to disturb the restaurant, Nancy steps outside to chase them away. Her pregnancy seems to make her more sensitive and quick-tempered, leading her to scold everyone, including Petty, who still hasn't cleaned up the spill. Undeterred, the teenagers enter the restaurant wearing masks and pretending to order food. Recognizing their intentions, Nancy threatens to call the police. Jake, overhearing her, realizes she's bluffing. Following the incident, Nancy vents her frustration at the staff, including Jake, Bobby, Petty, and two others. She criticizes them for not helping her chase off the teenagers. Jake, the senior staff member, suggests the teens were only joking and that Nancy overreacted. Feeling her authority undermined, Nancy decides to fire Jake despite his role as the restaurant's trusted chef. Jake immediately apologizes, admitting he still has unpaid bills and loans. He pleads with Nancy not to fire him, but determined to assert herself, Nancy stands by her decision and orders Jake to leave. Later, Nancy calls her father to inform him of Jake's dismissal. Her father is taken aback, believing she acted too quickly, especially considering Jake's importance as the chef. Although the menu isn't complex and Nancy could manage it herself, finding a replacement for someone with Jake's experience will take time. Despite this, Nancy stays at the restaurant alone until morning. As the night goes on, Nancy plays music and dances under the restaurant's disco lights. However, she soon notices bicycles parked across the street. Realizing the teenagers are back, she grabs a microphone and threatens to call the police. This time, the teens retaliate by banging on the restaurant windows. Left with no choice, Nancy makes a genuine call to the police. The officer who arrives informs Nancy that the teens are suspects in a recent violent murder. As they prepare to leave, the teens return and kill the officer. Terrified, Nancy hides in the storage room, where Bobby unexpectedly appears. They attempt to hide, but the teens find and capture them. Nancy and Bobby are tied up and forced to kneel facing each other. Nancy eventually escapes and fights back, but in her panic, she accidentally injures Petty. This reveals that Jake, Bobby, and Petty were all involved in a larger sinister plot. Earlier, when Nancy fired Jake, it became clear he was a drug addict who needed the job to fund his addiction, not to pay bills as he had claimed. When Jake sought out illegal substances from a dealer, lacking the money to pay, he even threatened the dealer with a gun he kept in his car's glove compartment. On his way home, under the influence, Jake encountered a group of masked bicycle-riding teens gathered around a bonfire by the roadside. Fueled by anger and eager to place blame, Jake confronted them, claiming they were the reason he had been fired. If the teens hadn't caused trouble at the restaurant, he reasoned, Nancy wouldn't have been upset enough to fire him. Fueled by rage and the substances in his system, Jake lashed out, stabbing one teen and mercilessly shooting the other three. Tragically, Petty, clueless about the escalating violence, found himself entangled in his brother's brutal actions. After the murders, Jake and Petty loaded the bicycles and masks into their car. Jake then instructed Petty to head to the restaurant while he went to meet Bobby and his older brother at their home. Not long after, at Bobby's house, Jake vented about Nancy's behavior, proposing a plan to spook her by wearing the masks and riding the bicycles. Bobby and his brother agreed. When Bobby asked about the masks and bicycles, Jake casually mentioned borrowing them from some teens, urging Bobby not to worry. Meanwhile, Petty, now at the restaurant, noticed his hands were still covered in blood from being forced to assist Jake. He decided to wash them at the back faucet, explaining why the water was found running when the police later arrived. Shortly afterward, Jake and his friends reached the restaurant, following through with their plan. They banged on the glass windows and terrorized Nancy with a series of scares. When the police arrived, they quickly hid. While Nancy and the officer discussed the earlier murder scene, Jake, fearing discovery, struck the officer from behind. As Nancy was gripped by terror, Bobby caught a glimpse of her fear and, feeling guilty, removed his mask, pretending he had just arrived to help. However, chaos ensued, and Nancy accidentally stabbed Petty, who was unaware of the full situation. Shocked, she felt sympathy for Petty and realized how deeply Jake had entangled his younger brother in this mess. Nancy also began to reflect on her role as a manager, wondering if she had been too harsh and impulsive when firing Jake. Later, Jake ordered his older brother to keep an eye on Nancy while he and Bobby took Petty inside to treat his injury. The moment Jake's brother was distracted, Nancy seized the chance to escape. She found a bag of rotten meat in the back and considered using it to her advantage. Meanwhile, Jake tried to stop Petey's bleeding, and Bobby, realizing things had gone too far, secretly grabbed the officer's car keys to escape. Nancy's father, who was out on a date, kept calling Jake, upset about hearing he had been fired without his approval. He insisted Jake should keep his job and ignore Nancy's decision. However, by this point, Jake had gone too far and left his phone behind in the car, unable to respond. Meanwhile, Nancy was being chased by Jake's brother. In a desperate struggle, she managed to push him into a deep fryer, stopping him for good. Hiding under a table afterward, she saw Bobby's lifeless body lying in a pool of blood, seemingly attacked by Jake. At that moment, Samantha arrived at the restaurant, responding to a call from Nancy. She froze in shock at the horrifying scene. Ignoring Samantha's stunned expression, Jake continued to chase Nancy as she fled toward the back storage area. With the first light of morning appearing through the windows, Nancy felt a glimmer of hope. She raced toward the exit, but Jake caught up to her in seconds. Without hesitation, he stabbed her in the back, causing her to collapse. Jake mercilessly dragged Nancy's injured body back into the empty restaurant. Unaware of her pregnancy, he pressed down cruelly on her abdomen before leaving her for dead. Moments after he left, Nancy regained consciousness. Miraculously, she survived due to a precaution she had taken earlier, strapping a piece of rotten meat she found in storage to her abdomen with plastic wrap. This improvised shield had saved her life by preventing the knife from hitting her vital organs. Later, Nancy found Bobby, who was still alive but severely injured. She revealed to him that she was carrying his baby, a result of a party they had attended together. With a renewed sense of purpose, Nancy took the police car keys and headed to Jake's house, determined to put an end to his rampage. Shortly after, Nancy confronted Jake, catching him off guard and stopping him once and for all. Exhausted, injured, but victorious, she struggled back to the restaurant on foot. A short time later, her father arrived, confused and worried, asking her what had happened. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.